It was a cold March night in 1964, when an event unfolded that would forever change the way we think about crime, society, and even human psychology. Kitty Genovese, a young woman living in New York City, was brutally attacked and murdered right outside her apartment. But what made this tragedy even more shocking was the fact that dozens of witnesses reportedly saw or heard the attack, and yet no one stepped in to help. How could this happen? What does it say about society? This is the story of the night that shook the nation to its core. Kitty Genovese was a 28-year-old woman living in New York City in the early 1960s. She worked as a bar manager and was known for outgoing and vibrant personality. Kitty was friendly, independent, and well-liked by those around her. She lived in the quiet neighborhood of Kew Gardens, Queens, and seemed to be living a happy, fulfilling life. But on the night of March 13th, 1964, everything changed, and Kitty's name would forever be associated with one of the most infamous tragedies in American history. Kew Gardens, Queens was a peaceful and close-knit neighborhood in New York City. It was a place where residents felt safe, where people knew their neighbors, and where crime was something distant. The streets were quiet, especially at night, and the area was home to hardworking families and individuals like Kitty Genovese. But on that fateful March night in 1964, the sense of security in this quiet community was shattered, leaving behind a lasting impact on the people who lived there. It was the early hours of March 13th, 1964, around 3 a.m., when Kitty Genovese finished her shift at the bar where she worked and began her walk home. Like any other night, she parked her car just a short distance from her apartment in Kew Gardens. Unaware of the danger lurking nearby, Kitty walked alone toward her building, not knowing that this night would be her last. In the quiet, dark streets, a figure was watching her, waiting to strike. As Kitty Genovese walked toward her apartment, Winston Moseley approached her from behind. Without warning, he struck, stabbing her in the back. Kitty screamed, desperately trying to escape the vicious assault. Her cries for help echoed through the quiet streets, and she stumbled toward a nearby building, hoping to find safety. Despite her efforts to flee, she was severely wounded, collapsing on the pavement as Moseley momentarily fled, leaving her alone, injured, and terrified in the darkness. Despite Kitty Genovese's desperate screams for help, many neighbors who heard the commotion chose not to intervene. Some peeked through their windows, while others listened from behind their doors. Yet no one called the police immediately. Each person assumed someone else would take action, a tragic example of what would later be called the bystander effect. The silence of those who could have helped only added to the horror of that night, leaving Kitty vulnerable and alone. Winston Moseley appeared to be an ordinary man, married, employed, and living a quiet life. But beneath the surface, he harbored a disturbing darkness. A serial predator with a history of violent crimes, Moseley later admitted he wasn't targeting Kitty specifically that night, but was out hunting for a victim. His motivation was cold and calculated. He wanted to kill. Kitty Genovese was tragically in the wrong place at the wrong time, becoming the focus of his horrific intentions. After the initial attack, Kitty lay wounded, struggling to survive. Winston Moseley, undeterred by the lack of intervention, returned to find her still alive but weakened. In a horrifying turn, he brutally resumed his assault, stabbing her multiple times and eventually ending her life. All of this occurred in the view or earshot of several witnesses, but still no one intervened. Kitty died slowly, and the silence of those who could have helped became one of the most haunting aspects of the tragedy. The next morning, the sun rose over Kew Gardens, but for many, the world felt darker. Kitty Genovese's body was discovered near the scene of the crime, and the shock rippled through the neighborhood. The residents who once felt safe in their quiet community were now gripped by fear and disbelief. How could such a brutal act happen right outside their homes? The tragic news spread quickly, and conversations filled the air with questions and sorrow. Kitty's death was not just a loss for her family and friends. It was a wake-up call for an entire community that had thought of itself as safe. The tragedy forced people to confront their own actions or inactions, and the reality of violence that can lurk even in the most peaceful of places. After the attack, police arrived on the scene, but it was too late. Kitty Genovese had already succumbed to her injuries. The officers were met with a chaotic situation. Witnesses were confused, and accounts of what happened varied. Some neighbors reported hearing her screams but didn't think it was serious, while others claimed they thought it was just a domestic dispute. The confusion frustrated the police, who were now faced with the grim task of piecing together the events of the night. They quickly began to gather evidence and interview witnesses, but the delay meant crucial information was already slipping away. The police response sparked further outrage in the community. People began to question how such a horrific crime could happen in their neighborhood and how they could have failed to intervene. It marked the beginning of a deeper conversation about responsibility and the role of bystanders in a crisis. The media coverage of Kitty Genovese's murder was intense and sensationalized. Headlines screamed about the brutal nature of the crime and how numerous witnesses failed to help. The reporters painted a picture of urban apathy, highlighting how people in the neighborhood heard her cries but did nothing. This narrative gripped the public's attention and sparked outrage. Many questioned how a community could stand by while someone was in desperate need of help. The coverage turned Kitty's tragic death into a symbol of indifference in modern society, making it a topic of discussion across the nation. From Kitty's murder, a psychological phenomenon known as the bystander effect emerged. This concept explains how individuals are less likely to intervene in an emergency when there are others around. People tend to assume someone else will take action, leading to a collective inaction. The chilling reality of the bystander effect was thrust into the spotlight because of Kitty's case, sparking debates about personal responsibility and the moral obligation to help others in distress. Kitty Genovese's death became a turning point in how society views community safety and our role in protecting one another. The news of Kitty Genovese's murder spread like wildfire, causing widespread public outrage. Reports stated that 38 witnesses had allegedly watched the attack unfold and did nothing to intervene. This shocking revelation left many people in disbelief. How could so many bystanders stand idly by while a life was in danger? The community and the nation grappled with feelings of shame and guilt. People began to question their own morality and the values of society. Discussions about personal responsibility and the need to act in times of crisis became common. The case raised important questions about human nature and the willingness to help others. As outrage grew, Kitty Genovese's tragic story became a symbol of the darker side of urban life, igniting a national conversation about empathy and the obligation to support one another in moments of need. This collective shock marked a turning point in how people perceived their roles in their communities. The media played a significant role in shaping the narrative of Kitty Genovese's murder. Headlines described her death in sensational terms, focusing on the shocking detail that 38 witnesses allegedly did nothing to help. This framing turned Kitty's story into a gripping tale of urban indifference, captivating the nation's attention. However, some details in the reports were later found to be exaggerated. Journalists highlighted the witnesses in action without fully understanding the situation. Many of those who heard Kitty's cries did not have a clear view of the attack. In the chaos of the moment, the events unfolded quickly, and the sounds they heard might have been misinterpreted. As we examine the story of the 38 witnesses, it's essential to provide a more nuanced perspective. Many people were not aware of the severity of the situation. Some thought it was just a loud argument, while others assumed someone else would call the police. This mindset of believing someone else would take action is part of a psychological phenomenon. Winston Moseley's trial began amidst a wave of public outrage. He confessed to the murder of Kitty Genovese, providing chilling details of the crime. In the courtroom, Moseley displayed little emotion, which further angered those who had followed the case. The prosecution laid out their case, presenting evidence and witnesses that described the brutal nature of the attack. And Moseley's defense tried to argue his mental state, claiming he had been disturbed at the time of the murder. However, the jury found him guilty. In 1964, he was sentenced to life in prison, where he would spend the rest of his life. Kitty Genovese's murder left a lasting impact on society. The case raised awareness about the importance of collective responsibility. The people began to realize that in moments of crisis, everyone has a role to play. This shift in perception encouraged discussions about the bystander effect and led to calls for greater civic engagement. As a result, many communities started to promote neighborhood watch programs and increased efforts to support victims of crime. Kitty's story became a powerful reminder that we must look out for one another. Her tragic death continues to remind us of the need for compassion and action in our communities, even in the face of fear. The witnesses faced a complex situation, and their reactions might not have been as straightforward as they seemed. This tragedy highlights not only the responsibility of individuals to help, but also the challenges in emergency situations where fear, confusion, and uncertainty can affect people's decisions. Understanding this can lead to more compassionate discussions about what happened that night. Kitty Genovese's tragic death played a crucial role in shaping emergency response in the United States. In the wake of her murder, many people questioned how help could have been so delayed. This led to discussions about creating a national emergency call system. In 1968, the 911 emergency system was established, making it easier for people to report emergencies and seek help. The goal was to ensure that anyone in danger could get immediate assistance, no matter where they were. Modern psychology continues to explore the bystander effect, using Kitty's case as a key example. Researchers study why people sometimes fail to act in emergencies, especially when others are present. They have found that factors like fear, uncertainty, and the assumption that someone else will help can prevent individuals from intervening. These studies help us understand human behavior during crises and highlight the importance of encouraging people to take action. By learning more about the bystander effect, we can find ways to empower individuals to step in and help others, creating a safer community for everyone. Kitty Genovese's tragic story is a powerful reminder of the impact of our actions or inactions. Her murder showed us that we cannot stand by when someone is in need. It is our responsibility to respond, help, and to care for one another. Even when it feels difficult or risky, we must remember that every cry for help deserves attention. Kitty's legacy teaches us to be vigilant and compassionate. When we see someone in trouble, we should not hesitate to step in or to call for help. Let her story inspire us to create a world where everyone feels safe and supported. Together, we can break the cycle of indifference and ensure that no one feels alone in their time of need. Remember, each of us has the power to make a difference. And with that said, thanks for watching True Stories. If this tale of mystery and superstition caught your interest, hit that subscribe button to join us for more fascinating stories from history's strangest corners. Until next time, stay curious.